Hello, I'm Norman Valdez, Senior Digital and Communications Manager with CERIC. On behalf of CERIC, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. We are delighted to have Dr. Mildred Cahill with us today to discuss her groundbreaking research on career development for young children and the vital role that educators play. We're proud to have supported this 3-year research project and the results the project has produced, including 2 free downloadable guides. One of them is an educator's guide and the other one is for the parents. As you'll hear today, educators are uniquely positioned to inspire, motivate, and support young children and their academic, social, emotional, and career development. Dr. Cahill, and we also know her as Millie, will share her practical tips, activities, and examples that educators can use in their daily interactions with children. Before the presentation starts, I would like to take a few moments to introduce you to CERIC for anyone who may be unfamiliar with us. CERIC is a charitable organization that focuses on education and research in career counseling and career development in Canada. We fund research that advances knowledge in the field, like the research you're about to hear in just a moment, and bringing you learning opportunities like this webinar is a key part of our mandate. CERIC has 3 main programs: the Connexus National Career Development Conference held in Ottawa every January. We also have contactpoint.ca website, which is a free online community for career development professionals, and the Career Journal of Career Development, which also is a free to access resource. You can learn more about this and other stuff that we do at CERIC at ceric.ca. Next, some quick housekeeping things. If during today's webinar you have any questions, please enter them in the questions box you'll see on your screen. Millie will respond to them towards the end of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will email you the slides as well as the recording of this webinar. We also encourage you all to engage with this webinar on social media using these popular Twitter hashtags that you see on your screen, as well as some social media accounts. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter. Dr. Cahill is recently retired professor of counseling psychology at the Faculty of Education at Memorial University of Newfoundland. She's a researcher in the areas of career development, diversity, multiple technologies, and counseling, and an educator involved in collaborative program development work locally, nationally, and internationally. Her research includes the design, implementation, and evaluation of counseling programs in career and diversity counseling for children, youth, and adults. Millie, over to you.
This is over to me.
There you go.
So thank you, Norman. We're just trying to set up the technical here. Good afternoon from St. John's, Newfoundland, Memorial University. I'm Millie Cal, and I'll be with you the next hour to tell you about the research project that a colleague, Dr. Edith Fury, and myself did, a 3-year project called the Early Years, Career Development for Young Children. I have some slides that I've sent to Norman and Yi at CERIC, and we'll walk through the slides. I'll talk over the slides as we progress, and hopefully it won't be as clear as mud. It'll be clear to you, and should you have questions, as Norman explained, you can write up your question, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end. I'm delighted to be with you on the only sunny day for the last little while here. We are still trying to shake winter off, and it's a great distraction to look at young children, their parents, and the educators. Today I'm talking to educators, teachers, and I welcome you all. I wish I could see you in person. It's very, very difficult not seeing all the enthusiastic faces out there. So I'll begin now just to progress through the slides. Oh, maybe one digression. As I just retired in September, so this is my first webinar since then, so I may be a little rusty and a little slow to transition, but bear with me. There's a quote here on the first slide that's taken from the booklets. And Norman referred to the booklets that hopefully you, pardon me, that you all have at this time. The booklet for educators, and there's a booklet for parents and guardians as well as little trifold brochures. So a lot of the quotes that are here are coming from the booklets that I have prepared, and I will attempt to overview these, especially the one for educators, as I go along. So the quote says, we need to provide children with opportunities to use their imagination. The possibilities are endless for the futures, and we need to allow them to imagine those possibilities. And that's a good one to start the whole process, or the transition into the process of career development for young children. Just for a moment, if I could just flash you ahead to our adult life that we're all living as educators and as parents, and the multiple roles and guardians that we hold in life. And to think about the economy and to think about career development, how it's interwoven in all parts of society. And we think about things like the privileged and the underprivileged. We think about opportunities that are out there, choices that are out there. We think of the whole world of employment, of colleges, universities, job training, and all of that is situated in adulthood. Yet the beginnings, or as people who are in this area refer to, the seeds of career development start very young. And when we talk about career development, I want to broaden your definition, and I hope you've had some time to go through the booklets. If you haven't, please do that. You download them from CERIC, and there's some more information than I'll be able to transmit to you today in just this 1 hour. But career development is not about just jobs and employment and work. When we talk about, or when I'm talking about career development for young children, I'm talking about a broader definition of career development. A definition of career development that sees young children in their time, in their life, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5, 6. In our study, we looked at 3 to 8, and we had some 9-year-olds. We had few 3-year-olds, and we had few 9-year-olds. But basically, 4 to 8, we had a good contingent there, and I'll refer to this after. So children are playing, they're living their lives, they're enthusiastic, and we can think of some of these adjectives here on the second slide. They're playing, very playful. Children are very resilient. They're learning a sense of industry and autonomy. Who am I? What am I doing? What do I like? And they're interacting with their families and with little children in play schools or in family centers or nursery schools. And they're actively engaged. So some of the other words like naturally curious, creative, living a lot of times in a fantasy and fantasizing and having hopes and dreams. But we set out in our research to see how much children knew about concepts like self-awareness, how aware they were of their world outside, their smaller world in the family, and the bigger world. And we did traverse into concepts of work that they're familiar with from their parents and their guardians and from the extended community, but a big part was the media. And we were pleasantly surprised how much knowledge children had. So the study really focused on young children's career development. But of course, we couldn't ignore the significant people like yourselves, educators, teachers, nursery school, play school, family centers, daycare, all of the whole area of the educators, big factors, big role models in their lives. And of course, parents. So the study had 3 parts, and I'll talk about that later. Let me go back to career development, what we're talking about. We're talking about children being engaged in learning. Children being engaged in career development means they're engaged in doing and at their developmental stage, age appropriate. We're not talking about giving them reams of material about different occupations, but rather trying to unlock each child's potential and interest and enthusiasm in the world about them and develop their interests, their abilities, and hopefully become engaged, active engagement. Of course, the definition that, and if you go through the conceptual development section of the booklet, you'll see that we define career development as a life story, a journey that each one of us has. But they're big players like educators, teachers, parents, peers, the media, the community, the larger and the smaller community, who are players in this life story for young children. Now, there's a lot more I'm sure you can appreciate, I'd like to say, but let me move on now. So the backdrop I just went through, what are we talking about career development? We're talking about meeting the child in his or her world where they are at the time. So the study, and here on this slide, you'll see a picture of the booklet for parents. And the top one is for educators. And the bottom one here is for parents/guardians. And just to repeat, when we talk about educators, we're talking about primary, kindergarten teachers, we're talking about preschool and daycare center teachers and workers and family center people as well. And the guides you can download from CERIC. The objectives of the study, which was done from 2014, 2016, 17, to examine children's awareness and understanding of career development context and the process, to look at developmental differences. And we found very rich differences between a 3-year-old and an 8 or 9-year-old. And of course, we're very fortunate to have parents, guardians, and educators take part in the study, and we're very appreciative of their input here. Okay, this study was a mixed methods study. We went through the ethics at Memorial University, where both of us were. And we developed surveys, so quantitative, and we distributed those. We had 495 parents, guardians, rural, classified as rural, and urban, 699 for a total of 1194. We had a small sample of educators, 64 rural, 72 urban for 136. But our real focus, oh, sorry, let me continue on the slide. So that's the quantitative. Then after the quantitative data was gathered and we did our analysis of the themes that emerged in the surveys, we did a qualitative study, followed up with parents and guardians, educators, and we did little focus groups with young children. I'll talk a little more about that later. So we had 436 children, 51 educators, and 41 where we had a lot of qualitative data. Just some of the findings, we got reams and reams, and in the booklets, as you go through the booklets, you'll see a lot of the data coming through and the interpretations of the data. But as a sample here, we found 85, so 86% of educators strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that helping children understand strengths and limitations is an important part of the curriculum. And about 58% said there's sufficient emphasis in the curriculum on helping children to explore and apply. In our focus groups, teachers were very eager, educators were very eager to go into this topic and to do more in terms of curriculum. And just as an aside here, our intention is not to go through all the data, but just as an aside, if parents and guardians, 77.7% believe that children should learn about the world of work as early as preschool and primary school, and 96.6% believe that children should learn about workers in their communities. Some of the sample qualitative data. Now, I think I should just pause here and just to give you an understanding, because I got quotes here from quotes from parents and educators. Two over here on your right are from educators, and the two on the left are from parents. And this is the kind of in-depth qualitative data that we have. Okay, for instance, in terms of a parent, saying career development is not an organic component of the curriculum, but they, referring to the schools, have career days, and they ask about the work that they ask children about the work their parents do. And sometimes they have special events. At the end of the year in kindergarten, for instance, they talk about what they want to be. Another parent said the earlier we talk about it, the better. The more children know about possible occupations, the earlier they can start and learn new skills and learn about themselves. So there's parents. Now, one of the things we presented to both parents and teachers / educators, is it too early to talk about this topic? And we had overwhelming results from the educators saying, no, it's not too early. We need to provide children with opportunities to use their imagination. The possibilities are endless for the futures. We need them to allow them to imagine those possibilities. We have community workers come into the daycare, for instance, nurses, firefighters, recycling, their topics and workers they bring in. And again, another quote, at a very young age, we should be talking about occupations we see in the community. The earlier we talk about it, the better. The more children know about possible occupations, the earlier they can start to learn new skills and learn about themselves. So that's just to give you a smattering of the type of data. Themes emerged through both the focus groups and the surveys, and of course in the work that we did with children. One of the big areas that emerged out of research had to do with children's hopes and dreams. And just, we'll get to the children a little later, but just to look at a sample of a quote from an educator. Future selves change based on others' interests. Students role play, the teachers role quite a bit. And I saw this in the little children's drawings and in their play. The teachers and educators are very significant in the children. I digress, this is not part of the quote. Frequently, their role models are who they look up to or who they imagine themselves were teachers. You see them in the play center taking turns as teachers. They role play Santa and Easter Bunny, whatever's happening at the time in their lives. So the note here that fantasy and real world get mixed up, interchanged. But the whole point is, these are possibilities, whether they're real or imagined, whether they're in reality or based in fantasy, and teachers recognize that. An example of, I'll go to the parent quote. She, meaning their daughter, talks about her hopes and dreams all the time. Singing and dancing has been consistent, and then often she has a backup plan, like working in the zoo. She loves animals. She always talks about wanting to help animals or people when they grow up. So there's a quote from a parent, that their observation of their child, very young child, age 4. And a child here. Now, this is the first quote I'm bringing to you from a child. I want to be a music teacher and work at fisheries and oceans like mom and dad. I want to be those things because I like singing and water. In order to be that, I have to get a good education and do very well in school. A little later, I'll point out to you, as I do in the booklets, that there are developmental differences in the little children. So you'll get very basic kinds of responses from children in 3, 4, and 5, some of them, but you'll get some 5-year-olds with more sophisticated responses as well. But here's an example of a child who's older, and not only telling you very definitively, I want to be a music teacher and I want to, you see multiple options and choices, but also I want to do that because I like singing. So in the comment you can see the child is pointing to their self-awareness. I'm good at singing and I like water. I'm interested in it. And not only that, in the last sentence, she says, in order to be that, I have to get a good education and do very well in school. In other words, there's a plan. She's able to reflect on how do I get there. So some sophistication. Now I want to pause. In the next few slides, I have actual paintings from children of different ages, drawings. Now you might be saying, how do you assess a child's knowledge of concepts like work, parents' work, self-awareness, hopes and dreams, decision-making, choice-making, and these were the work that we did in our study. These were the themes that we went through. Well, we used play and playing materials. We had puppets, we had paints, crayons, paper. We had, in a few with the young children, 3, 4, and 5, we had sand centers. We were very lucky when we went into the naturalistic settings the children were in, and they volunteered their play centers, and the children we were able to use their sandboxes and their puppets and their toys. Sometimes we did have a display ourselves to bring in. But here's an example now of a child, 5 years old, female, and there's some notes that we wrote not only on the front but on the back of those sheets. We, myself and our 2 research assistants who were very experienced working with children, and I'd acknowledge them, Sandra Taylor and Mary Kelsey, who retired as counselors and teachers and special education teachers who had worked with children for years. And so usually it was myself and 2 of the research assistants, we were running these little focus groups with the children. Now here's this little one who says, here's me, I'm a princess. And then she has, this is me over here, I'm skating and twirling around, I'm a skater. And over here, I'm at the beach. So this is me in multiple roles. And so in terms of saying, what makes you happy? What would you like to do when you get a bigger little girl, when you become a little bigger? And these are her hopes and dreams she has here. Here's a little boy who's 6 who says, I'm going to tame dragons. And do you know where I found out that? I found it out on YouTube. And that's what I want to do. When I become big, I want to tame the dragon. This is the big dragon. And you can see a very, rudimentary drawing, but he had a lot of explanation around it. And here's an example of an older girl, 8 years old, whose father had his own construction company. And she said, I want to become an engineer and I want to work with my dad in the company and I want to own my own company and build houses and do construction. And in her 2 pictures, you can see very readily that she has a very solidified dream. Here's a little boy who wanted to be a hockey player. And of course, the context, as teachers tell you, whatever's happening at the time, the Stanley Cup was on at the time, and he plays hockey, and he had very clear picture of what he'd like to do. And I think this is the last one here of the pictures. A dancer, this little one had multiple roles as well. I want to become a dancer, a singer, and a dance teacher. That when I get really good at dancing, and she also, I recall her, had very clear thinking about how she would get there, how she would practice, how she would go to school and learn, and become a teacher, and also to perfect her art. Okay, now I just wanted to give you a snapshot of the type of data that we found. And as teachers, some of the theoretical conceptual development, like Erik Erikson or Linda Gottfredson, I have summarized her stuff on page 31 and 32, and I draw your attention to what she's written about the role of gender and gender stereotyping, and about how young children, and this research was done way back, this is not recent research, it was done in 1980s, 1981. I have quotes there in the booklet, and since I raised it, I just want to read out. Children make choices based on their views of the world. They eliminate choices based on gender, social prestige, and attainability. And so I summarize some more specifics of her theory, which points out that children as young as 3 to 5 years are talking about what's possible for them and eliminating groups of occupations based on gender, social class, and ability level. And it's just fascinating. And in this study, there were a lot of evidence, there was evidence from the little children. And we talked to the teachers and to parents too about that. So, okay, so I'm trying to show you on this slide the age of the child, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I picked out some samples of what the children, these are children's responses. A child at age 4 said, I want to be a doctor. To be a doctor, you need to see if everybody's okay. You don't need to go to school. Just go to the doctor's place. I think I want to be a teacher too. Teacher was a familiar response. And you have a 5-year-old saying, I want to be a florist. To be a florist, I need to make flowers. The 6-year-old, I want to be a nurse. I'll have to go, now you can see, I'll have to go to nursing school. And 7-year-old, I want to be a scientist. I need to study science. Science is very important to me. I would like to find a cure for cancer. And another example, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. I'll have to go to university and I have to get a job as a teacher. So just to give you a spread of the thinking that's very sophisticated for young children, not only are they looking at kinds of occupations and that, which isn't the goal of what career development is about. However, looking beyond that, looking at their specific interests, looking at their ability and what's possible. We look at, as adults, we look at people and incidents which happened or who happened in our lives and who influenced us. And it's amazing when you think that oftentimes something happened to spearhead. Now, there's no doubt about it that young children have all kinds of talents, abilities, and, you know, all kinds of possibilities. But opportunities that we in society, in schools, in families, in the media, in the larger world, and educators and parents are key to opening up opportunities and helping children to engage. Now, here's the dry stuff that I hope is not so dry in your booklet, because these are the themes and chapters. I don't want this, not a book, but they're modules within these little booklets that emerge from the study. There's a whole section on the construct of self that parents talked about, that educators talked about, and very importantly, that young children talked about. Tell me about you. Tell me what you like to do. And a lot of times they painted a picture, they drew a picture, or they created a scenario with the puppets telling you what about. Then there was a whole, now this was very important to teachers and to parents, the whole business of how children adapt to change, and looking at the personalities of children that didn't like change and how they introduced change, and of course to the opposite scenario, and making decisions, solving problems. There was a whole section on the construct of work and parents' work, and it's amazing how when you tell children, do you know about work? Oh, yes, I know about work. Do you know I have work to do? I do important work. And they'll tell you, depending on their level, work in school, chores at home, taking care of their pets, going with Nana or Pop, and doing, and on and on. There's a whole section on enhancing interests and abilities. Development of healthy relationships, very, very important, and gender was covered, the wider diversity, and there's a whole section there. Influences on development, children's involvement both in extracurricular, but also in volunteer and helping in the community and becoming engaged in the larger world. And the big section as well on hopes, dreams, and aspirations for future selves. Now, I'd like to stop and go into each one of those, but I won't, because they're dealt with in the booklets and it would take too much time. Now, going back to the guide, so here let me try to pull it together. So here's the study. We had surveys administered to parents/guardians. We had surveys administered to educators/teachers, educators, well, the whole big area of young children from ages 3 through 9. We had all the qualitative data with 436 children with little stories and paintings and all kinds of things from the children, as well as sitting down with very little, like 3 and 4 in a group of teachers and parents. So in the booklets, we took the data and summarized them and created based on the themes that emerged, the topics, but within each module, you have the verbalizations from the children, the paintings from the children, you have vignettes that we devised based on input from parents and from the educators. So we have some vignettes, we call them, just to, with questions for reflections. Put in some illustrations like I showed you today, only there are more in the booklets, from children. And of course, summaries of the data and direct quotes coming out of the qualitative data from both the parents and the educators. So what's the whole purpose? Well, there were a lot of, the study was a beautiful study. And those of you, and you all do, work with young children, you know how rewarding and how wonderful it is to get a glimpse inside their worlds, and also to sit with parents, with educators, parents/guardians, and see their enthusiasm, their knowledge of the topics, and how eager they are for us to focus on the whole area of career development. So the booklets and the study, the findings, serve to empower educators and parents to support children's interests, abilities, and understanding of who they are, not to force feed them, not to speed up career development. I have a couple of quotes in the booklet, and let me just give you one from some experts, Herr, Kramer, Niles. The first 10 years of life have been called the nursery of human nature. And another one again from Niles and Harris Bowlby. Ignoring the process of career development occurring in childhood is similar to a gardener disregarding the quality of soil in which a garden will be planted. I think those metaphors, those sayings, are very descriptive in saying if we ignore that big chunk of a child's life, like we spend a lot of our time as adults going back, trying to retrospectively look back at our childhoods and see, how did I get that interest? How did I get that hatred of this subject or this type of scenario, whatever it may be? But here in this study, we were able to sit with the children at this point in time and get a glimpse into how they see the world, how they see themselves, and I can tell you they were very enthusiastic and very knowledgeable and very eager to pursue. So to help children adjust to change, make decisions, solve problems, to empower everyone to enhance children's knowledge of diverse work roles, but most of all, to encourage children to imagine, to create, to dream, and to enjoy life and learning. And, you know, children have a lot of talents, have a lot of resources. They're very resourceful. And I think we, as the mentors and the role models, have a responsibility, although I hate to put it like that, a responsibility, but we have a message to give. Now, having said all of that, I missed the most important note of all, which was parents, educators, parents and guardians are doing this already. They're doing this important work already and know fully about it. I tried to wrap up the booklet with sort of memos at the end. One's called Highlights and the other's called Note to Educators. And I just want to read a couple of quotes to sum up. Educators, you encourage, motivate, and teach children in preschool, daycare, and primary school as they discover themselves and their world. You play a significant part in the journey. You're doing that already in the curriculum, health curriculum, infusion into the curriculum, personal, academic, and social competence that children learn in school. Academic, social, emotional, and career development tasks are not separate but intertwined. In this study, we adopted the perspective that career development is life development. Career is a life story that begins at birth. Children create their own stories, but not in isolation. They have many co-authors, educators along with parents, guardians, peers, friends, the media, and larger community influence this process. Educators often underestimate the importance of their role in children's lives. Some do, not everyone. Their words of encouragement, praise, and recognition do not go unnoticed by children. Within our study, both children and parents pointed to educators as significant role models. The influence you exert in children's lives should leave you both challenged and humbled. You inspire children as they seek answers to important questions such as, who am I? How do I matter? What is my purpose? Who am I? Who do I want to become? You empower children to imagine and grow into their hopes, dreams, and careers. So I just there's other highlights there as well, but I wanted to make the point very explicitly that in our schools, this is happening, and teachers are very big players and motivators and are doing. There's something about the intentionality that I'm trying to point to, that are we aware and are we intentional? Yes, some of us are, but I think we can always be reminded of the important role that we play. And that, you know, the whole point about social competence, emotional, academic, all of that, that children are not only, they're learning empathy, they're learning integrity, they're learning ethics, they're learning through our actions and through their actions. They're curious, they're enthusiastic, they got all these fantasies and hopes and dreams. And I should stop.
Okay, so we have a question from Erica. She asks, how do you influence children to explore careers in a gender-neutral way when they often already have gender ideas about different jobs?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. And I don't think, personally, there's such a thing as gender neutral. The thing is, for young children, very young children, 3 and 4, they have this, they see the world oftentimes either or, very dichotomously, black or white. Girls do this, boys do that. I shouldn't do. They're trying to figure out and trying to make sense of the world. So it's quite normal to see them pick out, and if they like the color pink and they like the color purple, I would not, as a parent or as a teacher, be too upset about seeing children or having children in terms of showing preference for feminine versus masculine in a stereotypic kind of sense. I think more importantly is the notion, first of all, not to say to them this is wrong and this is not, but in your own way to point out and to create other options. Yes, you like that, but now next week, instead of pink, or next month, they might like orange as a favorite color, as an example. But your point to seriousness about, in the larger society, about the stereotypic and very boxed in notions that come across our media and come across our world, that's very problematic. So on the one hand, I'm saying developmentally, young children are trying to dichotomize, and I wouldn't be too alarmed about that. But I am alarmed, or I am more concerned about the essence of the substance of your question, which is, how do we do it? You keep plugging, and you keep especially trying to influence policy and policymakers, and bringing in the curriculum, diversifying, and creating many, many kinds of role models and options and realities.
All right, so we have another question here from Kate. How do we convince the doubters so that it can become a part of life more than just curriculum?
Yes, and that hits at the heart. That I think the responsibility of our children, or children's education, in the sense that we're talking the broad definition of social, emotional, academic, career, work, all of this, is the responsibility of multiple players. We can't do it alone. And everybody has the responsibility so that it becomes life development. Young children, the attitude towards completing a task, their excitement about helping Nan or Pop make the cookies at a very young, or walking their pet, or helping their parents, whatever the developmentally appropriate task is at the time. Getting children to become proud of what they're doing, to be engaged, to master the situation, to have a sense of industry. That's what we're talking about, these larger life qualities, and the seeds of, I like doing that. I didn't like doing this, however. I could become better at this, or on the other hand, I'm so at that, and I'll stay that way. That kind of agenda is a larger agenda. And I think our schools are being very holistic and are moving, our schools have moved, and oftentimes we still have a notion of stereotyping, and of course we do, even with the subjects, math, science. I notice STEM is now becoming STEAM, and we're bringing the arts and the sciences together. So, there's a lot of implications in your question, but I am really convinced that career development has to become larger and has to span the whole process of life.
So it looks that that's all the questions we have. Since there are no more questions, I'd just like to want to thank you very much on behalf of CERIC, Emily. From my perspective, I heard of the research. I was eagerly waiting for the guys to come out, so I'm very excited, and I think it's an important resource. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will email you all a link to the recording of this webinar along with a copy of the slides later today. You can download the free copies of Millie's Career Development for Young Children, both the educators and the parents guides, at ceric.ca/publications. Or you can just go to ceric.ca if it's easier, and just click on publications from the menu, resource and publications. You'll notice on the screen that there are some upcoming webinars, because we often do webinars on an ongoing basis, that may be of interest to you. At the end of this webinar, something will come up on your screen. It'll be a short survey that we ask you to please fill out. We ask you to just take a couple of minutes, and we greatly appreciate your feedback. And the more feedback we receive from you, the better we can do these webinars. With that, let me close by thanking you and all the participants for joining us on this webinar. And we hope to see you at another learning opportunity very soon.